The sound of a slap cut through the entire restaurant. 40 people went silent. Crystal glasses stopped clinking. Forks froze midair. Every single conversation in that marble-floored dining room died in an instant. And the woman standing in the middle of it all, 7 months pregnant, cheek burning, ice from a tipped water glass soaking through her dress, did not cry. She did not scream. She did not beg. She simply looked at the woman in the red dress, the woman who had just struck her in front of everyone, and said very quietly,
"We have a lot to color.
"Enjoy your dinner."
I just need a moment."
Then she walked out. What the woman in the red dress did not know, what she could not have imagined in her most humiliating nightmare, was that the pregnant woman she had just publicly assaulted was not some nobody who wandered into the wrong restaurant. She was the legal wife of one of the most powerful billionaires in the city. And in the next 100 minutes, you are going to watch everything that woman in the red dress thought she owned, the man, the money, the future she had been promised, collapse into nothing, while the woman she humiliated builds something that cannot be taken from her. Stay with us. This story is worth every minute. This is a story about what happens when a woman stops waiting to be chosen and chooses herself instead. For every woman who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel invisible in her own life, this one is for you. If this story moved something in you, please like and leave a comment below. Tell us the moment that hit closest to home. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are new here, subscribe to this channel. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about women who fall and rise and become someone even they did not expect. We will see you inside the story.
The wine glass shattered somewhere behind her. That was the first sound. A sharp, clean crack of crystal against marble, followed by the collective inhale of 40 people going completely, utterly silent. Caroline Whitfield looked up from her phone. She had been checking it again. 3 times in the last 4 minutes. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock. The small, repetitive ritual she had developed over the past year to fill the spaces where her husband was supposed to be. He was late again, 40 minutes late, which was not unusual. She had ordered sparkling water and a bread basket, and she had told herself it was fine. Everything was fine. The restaurant was called Billionaire. It occupied the entire 32nd floor of the Meridian Tower, with views of the city spread out below like a circuit board lit up at night. The floors were white marble. The walls were dark walnut. The lighting was the specific amber of expensive candles. Everything in Billionaire had been chosen to communicate one thing: you are exactly where you deserve to be. Caroline was 7 months pregnant and wearing a dove-gray dress her mother had helped her choose 3 weeks ago. She had her dark hair pinned back because it had been hot on the walk from the car, and she had been worried about being flushed when Dominic arrived. She had worried about being flushed. She remembered that detail later. The specific smallness of what she had been worried about. A shadow fell across the table. She was aware of it before she was aware of the person it belonged to. A tall shadow, deliberate, moving without hesitation through the arrangement of tables with the confidence of someone who had never once considered that a room might not accommodate them. Then a voice. It cut across the amber silence of Billionaire like a knife across fine linen. "You have some nerve sitting at that table." Caroline looked up. The woman standing over her was 29 years old and dressed in a red gown that moved like liquid. She was angular and polished and precisely beautiful in the way of someone who has invested significantly in the performance of beauty. Her dark hair fell in one smooth wave over one shoulder. Her jewelry was real. Her posture was the posture of someone who has never been told no in any room that mattered. She was looking at Caroline, the way a homeowner looks at a stray that has wandered onto the lawn. "Excuse me," Caroline said. "This table," the woman said, "is reserved." Caroline blinked. There was a reservation. She had confirmed it herself through Dominic's assistant 2 days ago. There had been no confusion at the front desk. The maitre d' had seated her with a smile and brought her sparkling water within 45 seconds. She was not sitting at the wrong table. She opened her mouth to say this. The woman's hand moved first. The slap was open-palmed and precise. It connected with Caroline's left cheek with a sound like a gunshot in the marble and crystal silence of Billionaire. Caroline's water glass tipped. Ice scattered across white linen. The breadbasket fell. The sparkling water spread in a slow, cold arc across the tablecloth, and 40 people held their collective breath. Caroline's hand came up to her face. The burning was immediate and specific. The left cheek, the hinge of the jaw, the particular physical reality of being struck by another person, something she had never experienced in her 31 years of life until this moment. She looked at the woman standing over her. The woman smoothed her dress, calmly, deliberately, as if she had done something entirely reasonable and was simply tidying up afterward. That table, she said, belongs to me. The maitre d' was already moving. 2 waiters had frozen mid-step. A woman at the next table had her phone in her hand, not filming yet, just holding it, the way you hold something when your body knows before your brain does that a moment requires documentation. And a young man named Tommy Briggs, 27 years old, a line cook on his break, watching through the service window because the noise had pulled his attention, pressed record. Caroline did not know about Tommy Briggs yet. She was aware of the ice melting against her dress. She was aware of the burning on her cheek. She was aware, with a sharpness that surprised her, of the baby, 7 months of her, warm and real and present, who kicked hard against her ribs in that exact moment, as if responding to the shock. She took a breath. She looked at this woman, at the red dress and the composed cruelty, and the absolute certainty of someone who believed she was untouchable. And she thought, she doesn't know who I am. And then, 1 heartbeat later, she doesn't need to. I know who she is. Because the name had been in Dominic's phone. She had seen it. Serena. Not once, once, not twice, but in the specific frequency of a name that belongs to someone a person thinks about constantly. She had seen it, and she had filed it away in the back of her mind, in the folder marked "Things I am not ready to open." She had seen it, and she had not said anything. Serena Ashford, the woman standing over her, waiting for Caroline to gather her dignity and vacate, was the woman her husband had been sleeping with. The maitre d' reached them. He was pale and apologetic. His energy went entirely toward the woman in the red dress, which told Caroline everything she needed to know about the distribution of power in this room. Miss Ashford, I am so sorry. If you'd like to be seated, your usual table. She was sitting at my table, Serena said. Ma'am. The maitre d' turned to Caroline with the expression of a man who needed someone to make this easier for him. I apologize. There seems to have been a booking error. Caroline's cheek was throbbing. Her hands were shaking. The baby kicked again. She stood up. She picked up her bag. She looked at Serena Ashford one more time, at the red dress and the composed cruelty, and she said, very quietly, "Enjoy your dinner." She walked out. The restaurant watched her go. Outside, on the sidewalk, the November air was cold against her burning cheek. She stood still for a moment. The city moved around her. Taxis, people. The ordinary machinery of an ordinary evening, and she stood inside it like a stone in a current. She called Dominic. 4 rings. Voicemail. She called again. 4 rings. Voicemail. She stood on the sidewalk with her phone pressed to her ear and she thought about two words. Her usual table. The maitre d' had said it without thinking. Her usual table. Which meant Serena Ashford came to Bel-Air regularly, which meant she was known here. Which meant the reservation that had been made in Caroline's name, at this restaurant, at this table, had been made by someone who knew exactly whose usual table it was. He knew she was coming, Caroline thought. He put me here to find out. The third time she called, he picked up on the second ring. Hey, sorry, I got so tied up. Are you at Bel-Air? His voice was careful, practiced, the specific voice of a man performing normalcy. Dominic, she said, who made my reservation tonight? A pause. Half a second too long. I had my assistant handle it. Why? Is there a problem? The baby kicked. I'll be home, Caroline said. She hung up. She stood on the sidewalk in the cold and she breathed carefully, in and out, for 60 seconds. She breathed for the baby. She breathed to keep her hands from shaking. She breathed because she was 31 years old and 7 months pregnant, and she had just been slapped in a marble-floored restaurant by her husband's mistress, and the alternative to breathing was something she did not have time for. The problem is not the reservation, she thought. The problem is that I already know the answer to every question I have been too afraid to ask. She walked to the car. She drove home. The city lights blurred slightly through the windshield. She was not crying. Her eyes were simply doing something she did not fully authorize, and she drove the long way, past the coffee shop on the corner of Alderton and Fifth, where she and Dominic had their first date 8 years ago. Corner table, October afternoon. The way he had leaned forward when she talked, as if her words required his complete physical attention. He was always performing, she thought. I just didn't know the show had other venues. The kitchen light was on. Caroline saw it from the driveway and stopped for a moment with her hand on the car door. Dominic was almost never home before 9. She had organized her evenings around his absences so completely that the yellow square of the kitchen window, visible from the driveway at 8:47 in the evening, created a wrongness she felt in her chest before she could name it. He was home. He had come home before her. She sat in the car for 3 minutes. She was not ready. She understood this clearly. She was not ready for whatever was about to happen in that kitchen. But she was also 7 months pregnant, and it was November, and the car was cold, and there was no version of tonight in which she did not have to walk through her own front door. She got out of the car. Dominic was sitting at the kitchen island, tie loosened, glass of scotch on the counter, his face arranged into an expression of practiced concern, the face of a man who had received information and was now performing the appropriate emotional response to it. He crossed the room when she walked in. His eyes went to her cheek, the redness there, the slight swell beginning along her jaw, and something moved through his expression. Caroline watched it carefully. It was not surprise. It was not the open horror of a husband seeing his pregnant wife injured for the first time. It was something more contained, the expression of a man who had been briefed. You heard already, she said. Serena called me. The name, said so easily, without the careful circumlocution of the past year, not a colleague, not a business contact, not someone from the Ashford group, just the name dropped into the kitchen air as if it belonged there, as if it had always belonged there. She heard, in that ease, the intimacy of a name that had been said 10,000 times. She called you, Caroline said slowly, to tell you she slapped your pregnant wife. Dominic set down his glass. He ran a hand through his hair. The gesture she used to find endearing, the tell she now recognized as delay. He was choosing his words. She watched him choose them. She didn't know who you were, he said. She didn't know. Caroline repeated. She thought you were... She saw someone at a table she expected to be her table, Caroline said. The maitre d' called it her table. Her usual table in the restaurant where you made my reservation. The fractional pause, the half-second hesitation she had learned to read like a second language over the course of 4 years of marriage. It was a mistake, Dominic said. Whose? He looked at her. And for one moment, just one, she saw the real calculation beneath the performance. Not guilt, exactly. Not remorse. The look of a man deciding what version of the truth would cost him the least. I'll handle Serena, he said. I'll make sure she... Handle her. Caroline said the word slowly. That's the word you're using. Handle her. Caroline? How long? The two words came out quietly, without theater. She was sitting at the kitchen table now, coat still on, bag on her lap, hands folded. She looked at her husband with a stillness that surprised even herself. It was not the stillness of acceptance. It was the stillness of a woman who had already processed the answer somewhere, deep underneath her consciousness, and was now simply requesting its formal delivery. Dominic looked at the floor. How long, Dominic? It's not... Don't tell me what it is or isn't. Tell me how long. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The ice in his Scotch glass shifted. Caroline heard every sound in the room with a sharpness she had never experienced before, as if her senses had been calibrated to a frequency she could not lower. 14 months, Dominic said. 14 months. Their daughter had been growing inside her for 7 of them. Her name, Eliza. They had already agreed on Eliza in a conversation during a weekend in the Berkshires 3 months ago over a candlelit dinner where Dominic held her hand and said, I cannot wait to meet her, had been chosen during month 10 of his relationship with another woman. Eliza had been growing inside a marriage that was already, by then, 9 months into its betrayal. Caroline's hand moved to her stomach. Automatic. Involuntary. You need to leave, she said. Caroline, let's talk about... Leave this house. Tonight. Her voice did not shake. She noted this with a kind of distant surprise. I will call you tomorrow when I am ready to speak to you. Not before. He tried 3 more times. She said nothing further. She sat at the kitchen table in her coat, and she waited with absolute stillness for him to finish performing the scene of a husband who wanted to stay. She waited for him to understand that the scene was over. The front door closed at 11:47. Caroline sat in the silence of her own kitchen for a long time. Then she went upstairs. She ran a bath. She sat in it, fully clothed, still in her coat, dress and all, for 23 minutes before she noticed what she was doing. The water went cold. She sat in it anyway. She looked at the soap dish and the shampoo bottles and the small candle she had bought from a shop in the West Village 2 years ago, now burned down to a stub. She thought, 14 months. She thought, he said, I cannot wait to meet her. She thought, he was already 7 months into paying for another woman's life when he said that. He said it anyway. He looked at me across a candlelit table, and he performed the scene of a man who was present. And I believed every word of it. I believed every word. God, I was so stupid. The signs were all there. The water went cold. She got out. She called Nora at 1 in the morning. Nora answered on the second ring. Tell me, Nora said. Not what happened? Not are you okay? Just tell me. Because Nora had been Caroline's best friend for 13 years and knew that questions created delay and delay created distance. And what Caroline needed at 1 in the morning was not questions. Caroline told her everything. The restaurant, the slap, the maitre d's deference, Dominic's face when she walked in, The briefed face. The face that had already been told. The name said easily. The 14 months. Eliza's name chosen during month 10 of a betrayal. The bathtub. Nora listened. When Caroline finished, there was a silence. "Honey," Nora said, "I have been biting my tongue for 2 years. Say it. He has always treated your marriage like a convenience. You made it a home. He made it a cover story." Caroline closed her eyes. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "I kept explaining it away." "Don't," Nora said, sharply and warmly at the same time. "You didn't know. You suspected, and you chose to believe in your husband because that is what you do when you love someone and you are carrying their child. That is not stupidity. That is humanity." The baby moved. "What do I do?" Caroline asked. "Tonight you sleep." Nora's voice was clear and firm. "Tomorrow you call Douglas Hargrove, of Hargrove Meridian, the best divorce attorney in this state." "It's too early for a lawyer," Caroline said. "It is exactly the right time for a lawyer," Nora said. "Go to sleep. I will be there at 7 with coffee and a list." She hung up. Caroline lay in the dark of the bedroom, his side of the bed empty, the indent of his absence clearly visible in the mattress. "He didn't choose me," she thought. "He chose the version of his life that included both of us. He kept both things, and he called it love, and I believed him because he said it the right way, in the right restaurants, at the right moments. He was so good at the performance. He was always performing. I was the audience. I'm done being the audience." Nora arrived at 7:03. She had a large coffee for herself, a decaf for Caroline, and a yellow legal pad covered in handwriting so small it took 2 passes to read. The list at the top was titled, "Things You Need to Do Before He Does Them First." "You've been up all night," Caroline said. 2 hours of sleep, Nora said. "I've been researching." She sat across from Caroline at the kitchen table, the same table where Dominic had said 14 months, and looked at the floor, and she opened the pad. "First thing is documentation," she said. "Everything you have, every text, every late night, every financial statement you can access. You gather it now, before he has time to organize a narrative." "I'm not sure I'm ready, Caroline." Nora's voice was gentle and completely unmovable. "He put you in a room with her. He chose that restaurant. He chose that table. He may not have known she would hit you, but he engineered an encounter. Whatever his reason, whatever game he was playing, he made a choice that put you and your daughter in physical danger. That is not a marriage problem. That is a safety problem." The word safety landed differently when you were 7 months pregnant. Caroline picked up her phone. "Douglas Hargrove," she said. "Give me the number." Nora's expression shifted, just briefly, into something that looked almost like relief. While Caroline made the call and scheduled a consultation for that afternoon, Nora moved through the kitchen quietly, making toast, finding plates, moving through the space with the ease of someone who had spent hundreds of hours in it and knew where everything lived. She also knew, had known for longer than she had said, about the changes she had noticed in Dominic over the past year, the new gym clothes, the upgraded wardrobe, the evenings that stretched longer and longer without clear explanation. She had noticed all of it and said nothing because Caroline seemed steady, and because marriages were complicated, and because nobody wanted to be the friend who dropped that particular bomb. She would tell Caroline this later, with tears, and Caroline would say, "You couldn't have changed anything." She was not entirely sure this was true, but she would say it. Now, however, there was the study. Caroline went there after the call. She stood in the doorway for a moment. It was technically a shared space, Dominic's desk on one side, her books and papers on the other. But she noticed, for the first time, how completely each side maintained its own world, how the division of the room had become something less like sharing and more like two people who happened to use the same address. She went to the filing cabinet on his side. She was looking for insurance documents. She had the legal right to access them. She told herself this was practical. She told herself she was simply being organized. She found the folder on the third drawer. It was manila, labeled in Dominic's handwriting with a single letter, A. Inside was a lease agreement. She read it once, then she read it again. The apartment was on the east side of the city, a high-floor unit in the Langham Building on Prescott Street, a building she knew because it had been featured in a real estate profile. She had read once, idly, on a Sunday morning, a premium building, an expensive building. The lease had begun 14 months ago. Of course it had. 14 months was the number now, the recurring timestamp, the marker of the moment her marriage had become something else. The name on the lease was Serena Ashford. The co-signer was Dominic Whitfield. Her husband was paying rent on his mistress's apartment. She had not known this. She had assumed, without letting herself assume in specific terms, that this was an affair of emotion, of weakness and distraction and poor judgment. She had not thought it was funded. She had not thought it was an arrangement. She sat down in Dominic's chair. She looked at the start date of the lease. She counted backward. The lease had been signed 11 days before she told Dominic she was pregnant. 11 days. Had he known she was already pregnant when he signed it? Had he suspected? Or had he made the commitment to another woman's apartment in the specific window between not knowing and knowing? And had he known, would it have changed anything? Or had he signed it and then received the news of his wife's pregnancy and simply continued anyway? He chose her before he chose Eliza, Caroline thought. In terms of commitment, in terms of timing, he put his name on her door before he knew our daughter existed. She photographed every page of the folder with her phone. She put the folder back exactly as she had found it. She went to the kitchen. Nora looked up from the toast. I found something, Caroline said. She showed her the photographs. Nora did not speak for a long moment. He's been paying her rent, she said. 14 months. The lease started 11 days before I told him I was pregnant. Nora set down the toast. She looked at Caroline with controlled, precise fury. Not pity, never pity. Nora was too good a friend for pity. The anger of a woman watching someone she loves be casually and deliberately destroyed. Okay, Nora said. Here's what I know. Dominic Whitfield has a net worth in the billions. You have been married to him for 4 years. You are 7 months pregnant with his child. And he has been financing a second household for the entirety of that pregnancy. Yes. Douglas Hargrove, Nora said, is going to make him deeply regret every single one of those 14 months. The consultation was at 3 that afternoon in a glass-walled office overlooking the city. Douglas Hargrove was 61 years old, gray-haired, and had the unhurried precision of a man who had conducted several thousand preliminary consultations and had not been surprised by any of them. He listened. He asked questions. He made notes in a small leather notebook with a fountain pen. When Caroline finished, he leaned back. The apartment lease is significant, he said. Commingling of marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship constitutes financial misconduct in this state. Combined with your pregnancy, the public incident, and the duration of the relationship, you are in a strong position. I haven't decided on divorce, Caroline said. Hargrove looked at her with the expression of a man who had heard this before. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said carefully, "I am not suggesting you make any decisions today. I am suggesting that you understand your options thoroughly before he understands them for you." She drove home slowly afterward. She took a route she used to take to work before she paused her consulting practice to support Dominic's expansion. She passed the coffee shop where they had their first date. Corner table, the way he leaned forward when she talked. He was performing even then, she thought. I just thought I was watching the real show. I'm not mad at myself for loving him. I'm done being mad at myself for loving him. I loved the man he performed. That man was well constructed. He deserved to be loved, but he was never real. That is not my failure. That is his. The video surfaced on the second day. Caroline did not post it. She did not know, at first, who had filmed it. She learned later it was Tommy Briggs, 27 years old, line cook at Billionaire, watching through the service window on his break, who had pressed record with the instinct of his generation and posted it that night without fully thinking about what he was setting in motion. The clip was 18 seconds long. It showed Serena Ashford's approach, the slap, and Caroline's stillness afterward, the extraordinary, terrible stillness of a 7 months pregnant woman who had just been struck and was choosing, in real time, not to break. By the time Caroline woke on the second morning, it had 400,000 views. By noon, it had crossed 2 million. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone and she read the comments for exactly 4 minutes before she put the phone face down and pushed it away. The comments were a landscape of female rage and recognition. "Who is she?" they asked. "Who is the pregnant woman?" they asked. "Find him," they said. "Find who did this." She was not ready to be the center of that storm. She went to the nursery instead. She sat in the cream-colored rocking chair she had spent 2 hours assembling on a Saturday afternoon while Dominic was at a meeting, one of the meetings she had not examined closely enough, one of the meetings that belonged now to the category of information she had possessed and refused to process. The nursery was pale yellow. She had chosen the color because it would work for a girl or a boy before they knew. The white crib, the small bookshelf she had been filling for months. Goodnight Moon, the very hungry caterpillar, a battered copy of Little Women that had been her own, a mobile of 7 ceramic birds that turned slowly in the draft from the heating vent. She had made a room for a person who did not yet know that her family had already fractured. The baby kicked. "I'm here," Caroline thought, speaking to Eliza the way she had been speaking to her for months. "I'm right here. Whatever is happening outside this room, I am here, and I will fix it." She did not know yet that fixing it would require, of all unlikely things, a conversation with Serena Ashford's brother. Brett Ashford called that afternoon. She did not know how he had gotten her number. She learned later it was through a chain, a mutual contact, a friend of Nora's, and that he had been trying to reach her since the video broke. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "I know you have no reason to speak with me. I'm calling because my sister needs help I cannot give her, and because what was done to you in that restaurant cannot be excused, and because I believe what is happening to you is connected to something larger that you don't know about." Caroline was in the nursery with the door closed and the ceramic birds turning slowly overhead. "What larger thing?" she said. Brett Ashford exhaled. "My sister," he said, "believes that Dominic Whitfield intends to marry her. He has told her this multiple times. He told her the pregnancy was a mistake, his word. He told her that once he arranged a quiet divorce, he would end your marriage and they would build a life together." Caroline said nothing. "She doesn't know," Brett continued, "that he has said this to other women before. She doesn't know about the 3 relationships before her, 2 before your marriage, 1 during. She doesn't know that the pattern with your husband is to maintain a primary relationship for social stability while... How do you know this? Caroline asked. I hired a private investigator 8 months ago, Brett said. When Serena first introduced us, and something about him felt wrong. What I found, I shared with my sister. She didn't believe me. She chose him over the evidence. A long pause. She is 29 years old, Brett said. She has been told she is the love of his life for over a year. She has built her entire near-term future around a story he told her. She is not a good person, Mrs. Whitfield. What she did to you is unforgivable, and I am not here to excuse it. But she has also been systematically deceived by a man who is older and considerably more experienced at deception than she is, and she is going to be devastated when the truth arrives. Carolyn thought about the woman in the red dress, the way she had moved through the restaurant, with entitlement, with certainty, with the specific confidence of someone who believed they were finally exactly where they deserved to be. She thought she won, Caroline thought. She doesn't know yet that there was no prize fight. What do you want from me? Caroline asked. I want to share the investigator's files with you, Brett said. I want you to have everything I have. And I would like, when the time comes, for my sister to hear the truth from someone she cannot dismiss. She has dismissed me. She will not be able to dismiss Dominic's wife. Ex-wife, Caroline said. She was surprised to find that the word did not hurt the way she had expected. Whatever you decide, Brett said. She agreed to the meeting. That evening, Dominic called. She picked up. She had decided, following Douglas Hargrove's counsel, that maintaining surface-level communication was important until the documentation was complete. Do not close the line, Hargrove had said. Let him believe the conversation is still open. Caroline, Dominic said, I want to come home. Not yet. We need to talk about this properly, about the video. The video. Now at 4 million views. Serena Ashford's social media had been found and was being systematically taken apart by comment sections across 15 platforms. What would you like to say about the video? Caroline asked. It makes her look... It documents what happened, Dominic. She didn't know who you... You keep saying that, Caroline said, as if not knowing my name makes it acceptable. She struck a pregnant woman. Whether or not she knew my name is not the relevant question. He was quiet. The relevant question, Caroline continued, is why she was in that restaurant at all, and why my reservation was made at her usual table, and who thought that was a good idea. I didn't think she would, but you knew she'd be there. The silence confirmed it. I will be in touch through my attorney, Caroline said. I'd appreciate it if you used the same channel. She hung up. She called her mother. Margaret Hargrove answered on the first ring. She always answered on the first ring when Carolyn called these days, because she had been sitting next to the phone since the brief call on the night of the slap, making casseroles and waiting to be needed. Mom, Caroline said. I'm already packing, Margaret said. Margaret arrived at 8 the next morning with a suitcase and the specific, efficient energy of a woman who had been waiting for permission to act. She did not say, I told you so. This was the first thing Caroline noticed and loved her for. She did not replay the careful hesitations of the past 4 years, the questions she had asked instead of statements, the gentle probing that had always stopped short of declaration. She simply arrived with her suitcase and 3 casseroles in a cooler and rolled up her sleeves and began making tea. The nursery is beautiful, she said, setting down her bag. Don't, Caroline said. I mean it. You made a beautiful room for her. He hasn't been in it since I finished it, Caroline said. Margaret absorbed this without comment. She found the kettle. She found the cups. She moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone who had been to this kitchen many times and knew exactly where everything lived. "Tell me what I can do," she said. "Be here," Caroline said. "That's all." "Then I'm here." The meeting with Brett Ashford happened the following day. A small coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of them frequented. Brett arrived looking like a less polished version of his sister. The same sharp jaw, the same dark eyes, but set in a face that showed 2 weeks of exhaustion rather than curated composure. He brought a manila envelope. Caroline brought Douglas Hargrove. The four of them sat in a corner booth, and Brett opened the envelope. And what came out changed the shape of everything Caroline thought she understood. The investigators' files documented not 14 months, but 7 years. 7 years of Dominic Whitfield maintaining the architecture of a respectable man, successful marriages, reputable partnerships, social standing, while conducting parallel relationships with a consistency that looked, on paper, less like weakness and more like preference, less like failing and more like choosing. "He doesn't do affairs," Douglas Hargrove said, reading carefully. "He does arrangements. He's not in love with anyone. He needs primary cover and secondary stimulation, and he maintains both with the precision of someone managing a portfolio." "That's a very clinical way of describing my husband," Caroline said. "Yes," Hargrove said. "It's also accurate." She read the file. 3 prior women, 2 before their marriage. 1 lasting 2 years, 1 lasting 8 months, 1 during the first year of their marriage, ending just before she got pregnant. Serena was the 4th, the most recent, the one who had been told she was the last. She thought about the weekend in the Berkshires. Dominic's hand on her stomach. "I cannot wait to meet her." He was 7 months into an arrangement with another woman. He had maintained 2 affairs before their marriage and 1 during its first year. He had brought each to a clean end before anyone had to know. He had, by every visible measure, been a devoted husband who was simply very busy. I was the cover, Caroline realized. Not the relationship, the cover. "I need to step outside," she said. She sat on the coffee shop's small front steps for 4 minutes in the November cold. Douglas Hargrove appeared in the doorway after 3 minutes and handed her a cup of tea without speaking. Then he went back inside. She drank the tea. She thought, "I built a life on something that was designed to look like a life." Then she corrected herself. She corrected herself in the specific voice that Nora's steadiness had begun to occupy in her inner dialogue. "No, you are a person who believed what you were told by someone who was very skilled at being believed. You are not naive. You were deceived. Those are not the same thing. The failure belongs to the person who lied, not the person who trusted. I'm not crazy. I saw the signs. I kept explaining them away because I loved him more than I questioned him. I'm done explaining." She went back inside. The semi-public disaster came 4 days later. Dominic called a dinner. Not with Caroline, with their shared social circle. His closest friends, their wives, people who moved in the same world as the Whitfields. He framed it as providing context, getting ahead of the narrative. His people management instincts operating in the only mode he understood. He did not know that Elaine Cross would be at that dinner. Elaine Cross was 47 years old, CFO of Whitfield Industries, and had worked with Dominic for 11 years. She was also, in the private accounting of her professional life, deeply respectful of Caroline, of the quiet intelligence she brought to Dominic's world, of the warmth and discretion with which she managed his professional relationships, of the fact that she was, in Elaine's assessment, considerably the more capable of the 2 Whitfields. Elaine sat at Dominic's dinner table and listened to him, characterized the marriage as complicated. She listened to him call Caroline difficult to reach right now. She listened to him describe the restaurant incident as a misunderstanding between two women. Two women. Elaine set down her fork. "I'm going to stop you there," she said, in the precise, unhurried voice of a woman who had run financial operations for 20 years and was not afraid of any room. "One of those women is 7 months pregnant with your child. The other woman is on a lease you co-signed with marital funds. I am happy to call that a misunderstanding between two women if you are also comfortable with how that characterization reads in a discovery process." The table went completely silent. Dominic looked at her. "Elaine, I have been loyal to this company for 11 years, she said. "I will continue to be, but I will not sit at this table and participate in a reframing that I believe to be deliberately misleading. Carolyn is my colleague and my friend, and she deserves better than what is being said about her in this room." She picked up her fork again. "Shall we order dessert?" she said pleasantly. One of the wives at that table called Caroline the next morning. She told her everything. Caroline listened to the whole story and then sat in silence for a moment. "That's Elaine," she said. "She defended you completely," the wife said. "She always has," Caroline said. "I just didn't know she'd say it out loud." The video reached 10 million views on a Thursday. Caroline learned this from Nora, who texted it to her with no comment except a single raised fist emoji. Caroline put the phone down and went back to the documents she was reviewing with Douglas Hargrove at his office. A spreadsheet of financial records that Elaine Cross had made available through channels that were entirely appropriate and entirely devastating. Dominic had been running personal expenses through the company for at least 2 years. The apartment lease was the visible tip. Below the surface were dinner receipts and jewelry purchases and a car lease and a travel expense account that had been used for trips Caroline had never known about. "The total," Hargrove said, "when we add the tax implications, is significant. It is not merely financial misconduct, it is fraud." "Against the company or against me?" Caroline asked. "Both," Hargrove said. She drove home through the late afternoon traffic, and she thought about the word fraud. She turned it over in her mind the way you turn over a stone to see what lives underneath it. She had spent 4 years in a marriage, and she had not been deceived. Exactly. She had been defrauded. There was a difference. Deception was personal. Fraud was systematic. Fraud required planning. Fraud required the cold, ongoing management of information and appearances. She had been managed. She had been the most important element in someone else's management system. She parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment. The kitchen light was on. Margaret was inside. She had probably made something for dinner. She had probably tidied the kitchen and was probably waiting with the specific tactful patience of a woman who understood that her daughter needed to come in on her own terms. She thought about something Brett Ashford had said during their meeting, something that had stuck in a corner of her mind and was now working itself loose. He said she didn't believe the evidence when I showed her. She chose him over the evidence. What does that mean, to choose a story over evidence? It means the story is providing something the evidence cannot. It means the story is filling a need that the truth is threatening. It means you are not choosing the person. You are choosing the feeling the person represents. Serena chose the feeling, Caroline thought, and so did I. For a long time, so did I. The difference is that I stopped. She got out of the car. Margaret had made chicken soup. She had also, without comment, reorganized the pantry into a configuration that made considerably more sense. Caroline noticed this and felt a complicated rush of gratitude that was also faintly like being seen clearly, seen in the way a mother sees you, in the way that does not require explanation. "Elaine Cross is going to testify if needed," Caroline said, sitting at the kitchen table. Margaret stirred the soup. "Of course she is," she said. "You don't know Elaine." "I know the type," Margaret said. "There's always one person in the room who has been waiting for permission to tell the truth. Elaine Cross has apparently been waiting 11 years. Dominic's attorney called that evening. His name was Stuart Crane, and he had the smooth, carefully modulated voice of a man who had delivered bad news on behalf of wealthy clients so many times that it had become aesthetically pleasant. He called to let Douglas Hargrove know. Hargrove relayed the message to Caroline that Dominic would like to explore settlement options before the situation became more complex. "He's scared," Hargrove said. "He should be," Caroline said. "The Elaine Cross situation has accelerated his timeline. He did not anticipate the CFO of his own company becoming a potential witness. He would like to resolve this quietly and quickly." What is quickly? His attorneys have indicated he would like a preliminary meeting within the week. Caroline thought about this. "No," she said. "Not yet. I want the audit complete first. I want the full picture of what was done with marital assets before I sit across a table from him." Hargrove paused. "That is strategically sound," he said. "It's not strategy," Caroline said. "It's accuracy. I want to know the truth about my own life before I negotiate what it's worth." There was a silence. "Mrs. Whitfield," Hargrove said, "I have been doing this for 30 years. I do not often tell clients that they are going to be fine. I am telling you now." She thanked him and hung up. She sat at the kitchen table with Margaret across from her, and she thought about the conversation with Hargrove, and she thought about Dominic scared, and she thought about 14 months and 4 women and a bilateral world that had been running parallel to her own. "I deserved better than this," she thought clearly and without drama. Not as a performance, not as a statement for someone else's benefit, just a simple, internal declaration that felt, in its quietness, more powerful than anything she could have said aloud. "I deserved better. I know that now, and I am done organizing my life around the needs of someone who never believed that." She picked up her spoon. She ate the soup. It was very good soup. The collapse came on a Tuesday. Nothing specific happened on this Tuesday. There was no new revelation, no additional betrayal, no fresh document to review or attorney to call. It was simply a Tuesday in November, 2.5 weeks after the restaurant, and Caroline had been moving through each day with such careful, deliberate functionality that the grief had not yet found its full opening. She went to bed at 10. She woke at 1:40. She lay in the dark for 10 minutes and could not find a reason to stay in the bed. Her body moved, without her full instruction, to the room at the end of the hall. The nursery was quiet. The ceramic birds were still. The pale yellow walls held the dim light from the street lamp outside the window. The white crib stood waiting, as it had stood waiting for 3 months, ready for a person who was not yet here. Caroline sat in the rocking chair. She looked at the room she had made. She had painted these walls herself, over a weekend in August when Dominic was in Chicago for a conference. She had called Nora to help with the trim, and they had listened to old music and eaten too much takeout, and she had gone to bed with paint in her hair, and she had been so happy. She had been so happy in this room, making it real, making it ready, making it the first place her daughter would come home to. The bookshelf. She had been filling it for months. Goodnight Moon, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Winnie the Pooh, Little Women, battered, spine cracked, her own copy, the copy her mother had given her at 7 years old. She had been saving it. She had made a room for a person who did not yet know that her family had already fractured. The thought arrived fully formed, with a precision that took her breath away. Eliza will never know her family as whole. For her, this will simply be what family looks like. She will not know what she lost because she will never have had it. And Caroline, who had been so controlled, so deliberately composed, so insistently functional, through 2.5 weeks of documentation and attorney consultations and casseroles and yellow legal pads, finally, completely and without any reserve at all, began to cry. She cried the way she had not cried since childhood, without dignity and without any attempt at management, with her hands pressed flat against her stomach, because even in the middle of this, she was aware of Eliza, always aware of Eliza, the gesture involuntary and entirely made of love. She cried for the marriage she had thought she had, for the woman she had been, the 31-year-old who paused her own career and leaned completely into someone else's life because she believed in it. She had believed in it with everything she had. The evidence had been so carefully constructed. The performance had been so precise. She cried for the weekend in the Berkshires, for the candlelit dinner, for I cannot wait to meet her. She cried because somewhere underneath all of it, she had still loved him. Not the real him. She understood now there was no real him, or rather that the real him was someone she had never been introduced to. But the performed him, the constructed him, the man who leaned forward when she talked as if her words required his complete attention. She had loved that man thoroughly and completely, and he had never existed. The baby kicked, hard, 3 times in quick succession, the way she kicked when Caroline's body was signaling distress, as if Eliza, even unborn, was monitoring her mother's nervous system. Caroline put both hands on her stomach. "I know," she said aloud, to the quiet room. "I know." She sat in the rocking chair until 4 in the morning. She did not sleep. She did not go back to the bedroom. She sat in the pale, yellow room with the ceramic birds, still in the still air, and she grieved, fully, completely, without management, for everything that had been real and everything that had not. At 4, she stood up. She went to the kitchen and made tea. She stood at the counter and drank it, looking out at the dark backyard, the bare garden, the cold ground. He does not get to have this, she thought, not with anger, with something quieter and more durable. He does not get to have the nursery and the rocking chair and the ceramic birds. He does not get credit for the home I built while he was building something else. This is mine. She is mine. And I am keeping both. When the sun came up, she called Dr. Patricia Weston. Dr. Weston was 44 years old and had been her OBGYN for 3 years. She was direct and warm in the specific way of someone who has spent 2 decades delivering difficult news and has learned that the kindest delivery is also the clearest. "I want to talk about the stress," Caroline said. "I want to know what it's doing to her." "Come in today," Dr. Weston said. "I would rather overcheck than undercheck." The appointment was thorough. Eliza was fine. Her heart rate was strong. Her development was on track. She was, according to every available metric, a person who was robustly and stubbornly preparing to arrive. "She's well," Dr. Weston said. "You're under significant stress, and I want to keep monitoring, but right now, she is well." Caroline exhaled. "Can I ask you something?" Dr. Weston said. "Yes." "The incident in the restaurant. Were you physically hurt? I saw the video." "My cheek," Caroline said. "Nothing structural. I'd like to document it, Dr. Weston said simply. "Medically. In your records. With your permission." Caroline understood what she was offering. Medical documentation, dated and signed, of a physical assault on a pregnant patient. Not just a viral video, but a physician's record. Evidence that could not be dismissed or reframed. "Yes," she said. "Please." Dr. Weston made the notes. She wrote clearly and specifically, in the language of medical records, what she observed. She dated it. She signed it. She gave Caroline a copy. Caroline folded it and placed it in her bag next to her phone. One more piece of the truth. Documented, preserved, permanent. The text from Serena came on a Wednesday afternoon. I know you won't believe me, but I need to talk to you. Not about him, about what I know. Caroline stared at it for a long time. She showed it to Nora, who was on the kitchen couch eating soup and pretending to read a magazine. Trap? Nora said immediately. Possibly. Definitely. She was set up too? Caroline said. Nora lowered the magazine. She hit you, she said. She did, and she thought she was defending something she had been told was hers. Caroline paused. That doesn't make her a good person, but it makes her someone who is about to have her own floor fall out from under her. Nora was quiet for a moment. Call Hargrove, she said finally. Douglas Hargrove's response, when consulted, was unexpected. Meet with her, he said. Neutral location. Record the conversation. This is a single-party consent state. Do not offer information. Let her talk. Bring Miss Pemberton. My lawyer is telling me to meet the mistress, Caroline said. Your lawyer, Hargrove said, has done this before. The meeting was in a hotel lobby cafe 3 days later. Neutral ground selected by Hargrove. A quiet corner booth in a place that neither of them frequented. Serena Ashford, without the red dress and the curated composure, was smaller than she had appeared in the restaurant. She was wearing dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater. No jewelry. She had not slept well in some time. This was visible in the way exhaustion settles around the eyes and along the jaw. She had also clearly been crying, not recently, not performatively, in the sustained private way that leaves traces. She looked up when Caroline walked in. Caroline was aware, in that first moment, of the complexity of her own feelings. There was anger, real and legitimate. There was something that felt uncomfortably like recognition. There was the undercurrent that had been running beneath everything for weeks. Eliza. This concerns Eliza. Keep that central. She sat down. Nora sat beside her. Thank you for coming, Serena said. Say what you came to say, Caroline replied. Not unkindly, simply directly. Serena wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. He told me you knew, she said, that you had an arrangement, that the marriage was what he called contractual, that you both understood it had moved past its original purpose, and you were simply maintaining it for social and financial reasons. Caroline said nothing. He told me you were waiting for the pregnancy to be over before filing, Serena continued, that you had agreed on terms, that I was not hidden. She paused. That you knew. I did not know, Caroline said. I understand that now. Did you believe him when he said it? Serena was quiet for a moment. I wanted to, she said. I was not unaware that the situation was convenient for him, that a man with everything to lose financially would have reasons to construct a narrative that kept everyone compliant. She paused. I chose to accept his version because the alternative was accepting that I had been deceived. And now? Caroline said. Serena looked at her directly for the first time. I struck a pregnant woman in a public restaurant, she said, because I had been told she was an interloper in something that belonged to me. I understand now how completely that was constructed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect it. I'm asking to give you what I have. Which is what? Texts, emails, a recorded conversation where he tells me specifically that you have an arrangement and that he intends to end the marriage within the year. She paused. I want you to have it. Nora, beside Caroline, had gone completely still. Why? Caroline asked. Because he lied to me, Serena said simply. And I don't reward that. The evidence Serena provided was, in Douglas Hargrove's later assessment, transformative. 47 text messages in which Dominic described Caroline in terms that would have been devastating to someone who still needed to be loved by him. Caroline read through them in Hargrove's office the following morning and was surprised to discover that what she felt was not hurt but distance, a strange, clarifying distance, as if she were reading messages about a character in a story rather than about herself. He never saw me, she thought. He saw a function. And when the function became inconvenient, he described the inconvenience. That is not me. That is his inventory. The recording was 42 minutes long. Dominic's voice, clear and apparently sincere, telling Serena that his marriage was over in everything but name, that Caroline was aware and had agreed, that he intended to file for divorce within 6 months of the birth. He said, in the recording, she knows what this is. She's always known. She just doesn't want to deal with the public part yet. Caroline is practical. She'll take a fair settlement and move on. Practical. She'll take a fair settlement and move on. Hargrove paused the recording. How are you doing? He asked. I'm deciding what fair means, Caroline said. She called Elaine Cross that afternoon. The call was brief and professional. She told Elaine that she was grateful for what had been said at the dinner. She told Elaine that she was aware of her own position in relation to Whitfield Industries, the advisory board seat, the minor shareholding from the wedding gift, the years of watching and understanding the company from the inside. I know what you're asking, Elaine said. What am I asking? You want to know if I will tell the truth about the company's position. If there is financial misconduct, commingling of assets, unauthorized use of company funds, then the advisory board should be given the opportunity to review it. A pause. Should they? Caroline said. I can ensure the relevant documents are made available to whoever needs to review them, Elaine said carefully. Thank you, Elaine. Don't thank me, Elaine said. I'm doing my job. The advisory board of Whitfield Industries met without Dominic present the following week. Elaine presented the forensic findings. The board understood their fiduciary liability immediately. They appointed an independent audit before the meeting was over. Dominic's attorneys called Douglas Hargrove the same afternoon. He wants to settle, Hargrove told Caroline. Of course he does, she said. Vivian Caldwell called on a Thursday morning. Caroline had not expected this. Dominic's mother was 65 years old and had maintained, throughout Caroline's marriage to her son, the pleasant, slightly removed warmth of a woman who approved of a daughter-in-law, without being particularly invested in her. She had been gracious at holidays. She had sent birthday cards. She had appeared at appropriate occasions and performed the role of supportive mother-in-law with the ease of someone who understood roles clearly. Caroline did not know her well. She picked up the phone. Caroline, Vivian said, I need to tell you something I should have said 4 years ago. Mrs. Caldwell. Vivian. A brief pause. I knew about Serena. I have known for nearly a year. Dominic told me, not as a confession, as a disclosure, as if I were a board member he was bringing up to speed. Caroline said nothing. I did not tell you, Vivian continued, because I believed, I hoped, that he would end it on his own, that the pregnancy would change things, that he would make the right choice without anyone having to force it. Another pause. I was wrong, and I owe you an apology that no amount of silence will adequately deliver. Did you know about the others? Caroline asked. Before Serena. A long pause. There was one during the first year of your marriage, Vivian said quietly. I found out accidentally. I asked him to end it. He said he would. I believed him. Caroline sat down at the kitchen table. You have been managing him. she said slowly, for his entire life. The silence on the line was its own answer. I love my son, Vivian said, and I am deeply ashamed of who he has chosen to be. She paused. I would like, if there is any version of this you can accept, to be in my granddaughter's life. Whatever happens between you and Dominic, I want her to know her grandmother. I need to think about that, Carolyn said. Of course. Vivian, she said, I need you to do one thing. Tell me. I need you to tell the truth to Dominic, to his lawyers, to whoever asks. A long pause, the longest yet. I will, Vivian said. The settlement negotiations took 10 days. They were conducted entirely through attorneys. Caroline did not sit across the table from Dominic. She did not want to. There was nothing left to say that required her physical presence in a room with him, and she had learned in these past weeks that the desire to be seen by the person who has wronged you is one of the most human and most costly impulses there is. She did not need to be seen by him anymore. She had stopped needing that somewhere in the nursery at 4 in the morning, holding her stomach, watching the ceramic birds go still. Hargrove communicated on her behalf. Stuart Crane communicated on Dominic's behalf. The independent audit had produced findings that gave Dominic's attorneys very little room to negotiate. He wants to settle quickly, Hargrove reported. He wants the advisory board situation resolved before the audit becomes public. He is prepared to be generous. I want the house, Caroline said. I want full legal custody as primary parent with reasonable visitation. I want his name removed from every document that can have his name removed from it. She paused. And I want a written acknowledgement, witnessed and notarized, a full acknowledgement of the financial misconduct. Hargrove was quiet for a moment. The last item is unusual, he said. It's important. May I ask why? Because in 20 years, Caroline said, when my daughter asks what happened, I want there to be a document she can read, and her father's own signature. That tells the truth. A pause. I'll draft it, Hargrove said. Dominic's counteroffer arrived within 48 hours. It included the house. It included a settlement figure that Hargrove described, with professional restraint, as very favorable. The custody terms were as requested. The written acknowledgement, 2 paragraphs, specific, unambiguous, signed and notarized, was included. It did not include an apology. Caroline did not ask for one. She had understood, somewhere in the long process of these past weeks, that she was not going to receive the apology she deserved. That Dominic was not capable of the kind of genuine remorse that would make an apology mean anything. What she would receive, if she asked, was another performance, and she was done being an audience. She signed the settlement documents on a Friday morning in Douglas Hargrove's office. She was 31 years old. She was 8 months pregnant. She signed her name clearly and without hesitation and handed the pen back to the notary. She went home. She reorganized the entire kitchen that afternoon. Not at 2 in the morning this time. Not in the dark. Not in crisis. In full afternoon light, with her mother helping, with music on. The old music she and Nora had played while painting the nursery. She moved every plate and bowl and glass to the position that made sense for how she used the kitchen, rather than how they had used it together. Margaret stood holding a stack of mixing bowls with an expression of patient bemusement. Why are we doing this? She asked. Because it's mine now, Caroline said, and I want it to look like mine. She put the good casserole dishes on the lowest shelf, with an easy reach. She put Dominic's Scotch glasses, the heavy crystal ones he had inherited from his father, in a box for donation. She made the kitchen hers. Then she made dinner and ate it with her mother at the kitchen table, and felt, For the first time in weeks, something that was not exactly happiness, but was in the neighborhood of it. A low, warm, durable sense of ground beneath her feet, her ground, solid, real. He thought I was practical, she thought. He thought I would take what I was offered and disappear quietly back into whatever smaller life he had designated for me. He doesn't know what I'm capable of. I barely knew it myself, but I'm learning. Eliza Rose Hargrove Whitfield arrived on December 14th, 6:22 in the morning. After 11 hours of labor, during which Nora and Margaret were both present, Margaret at Caroline's shoulder, Nora holding her hand, with a grip that Caroline suspected had left a mark, both of them saying the right things in the right moments, with the specific competence of women who understood that what was needed was not advice, but presence. Douglas Hargrove. Her father, who shared his name with the divorce attorney and had always been quietly amused by the coincidence, was in the waiting room, with his hands folded and his eyes wet. He had driven 8 hours when Caroline called him. He had not been asked. He had simply been told, and he had driven. Eliza weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had Caroline's jaw and the wide, dark eyes of someone still deciding what color they intended to be. She had strong opinions, immediately apparent, about the temperature and lighting of the room she had arrived in. She expressed these opinions clearly. She was perfect. Caroline held her daughter in the dim morning light of the delivery room, and she thought, everything that happened had to happen so that this could happen. And then she thought, that is not entirely true, but she is here, and I am here, and both of those things are real, and nothing else is required to be real right now. Dominic arrived at the hospital at 9 in the morning. He came with flowers, with the specific expression of a man who was not certain of his welcome and was performing graciousness in its absence. His attorneys had communicated through Hargrove that he would be present for the birth. The settlement specified notification. Caroline let him in. She watched him hold Eliza for the first time. He was awkward at first, the specific awkwardness of a man who has not held many newborns. And then something shifted in his expression, something less performed, something that, in another version of this story, might have been the beginning of something real. Caroline watched this and felt the specific, complex weight of a feeling for which there was no clean name. It was not grief. It was not satisfaction. It was the feeling of watching someone you have stopped loving interact with someone you will love for the rest of your life. And holding those two things in the same moment without collapsing under their contradiction. He is not a monster, she thought. He was never a monster. He is a man with a fundamental incapacity for the particular kind of love that staying requires. The sustained, unglamorous, witnessed love of a person who sees you clearly and remains anyway. He cannot do it. He has demonstrated this repeatedly across 7 years and 4 women. He is simply not capable of it. Eliza will know him. She will have access to him. She will make her own determinations. I will not narrate her father to her. I will give her the document when she is old enough, and I will let her read it herself, and I will answer her questions honestly, and I will trust her to be the person she already appears in this first hour of her life to be. Determined, clear-eyed, with opinions. She's beautiful, Dominic said. Yes, Caroline said. Caroline, not today, she said. Not here. Today is just for her. He nodded. He held Eliza a while longer. He passed her back carefully. He looked at Caroline once more, with an expression that contained many things, none of which she was any longer required to interpret, and he left. Margaret came back in with coffee. She sat next to the bed and looked at her daughter holding her granddaughter, and she said nothing, because nothing was needed. Douglas, her father, came in shortly after. He sat in the chair by the window, and he put on his glasses, and he looked at Eliza with the expression of a man who has been waiting a very long time for something exactly this specific and this good. "She looks like your mother's side," he said. "She looks like herself," Caroline said. "She does," he agreed. "She absolutely does." That the weeks after Eliza's birth were full, in the way that only newborns can make things full. There were feeds at all hours. There was the particular exhaustion of a body that had done something enormous and was now required to sustain another life. There was the extraordinary, disorienting love, the love that has no parallel in any language, the love that removes the floor from underneath you in a way that is entirely unlike grief, even though the sensation of falling is similar. Nora visited every other day. She brought food and sat on the couch and held Eliza while Caroline showered, and she did not require conversation. She was simply present in the full and specific way that the very best friendships are present, without agenda and without performance. Margaret stayed for 3 weeks. She was up in the night. She knew, with the specificity of someone who had done this before, exactly when to help and exactly when to leave the room. She went home the day Caroline said, "I've got it now. I think I've actually got it." "Of course you do," Margaret said. "Mom," Caroline said, "thank you for all of it. Not just the last 3 weeks." Margaret looked at her daughter, really looked at her in the way she had been wanting to look at her for months. Now that there was something different in her face to see. And she said, "Darling, this is what I'm for." The legal acknowledgement from Dominic arrived by courier at the end of December. 2 paragraphs, specific, unambiguous, signed and witnessed and notarized, exactly as requested. Douglas Hargrove had drafted it in language that left no room for later reinterpretation. Caroline read it once. She folded it carefully and placed it in the filing cabinet in the study. Her study now entirely hers, the desk on his old side cleared and given to a new purpose. In a folder, she labeled with Eliza's name. She put it away. She did not need to read it again. Serena Ashford sent a card in early January. It was addressed to Caroline and Eliza specifically. It said, "I hope you are both well. I am sorry for what I did. I am learning what the rest of it costs. I wish you both good things." Caroline read it twice. She propped it on the windowsill of the nursery next to a small succulent her father had brought. She was not certain she would ever like Serena Ashford, but she was certain, in the way you become certain about things that have required significant effort to understand, that what had happened between them was less a story of 2 women and a man, and more a story of 2 women and a system. A system designed to maintain comfortable arrangements for people who had not previously been required to experience their consequences. That system had been significantly disrupted. Vivian Caldwell came to meet her granddaughter in the second week of January. She arrived with a small gift, a cream-colored blanket, soft and well-chosen. And she held Eliza with the practiced ease of a grandmother, and she did not look at Eliza the way she looked at Dominic. She looked at her the way you look at something entirely new. "She's her own person already," Vivian said. "She is," Caroline agreed. Their relationship was still learning its shape, still tentative, still finding the boundaries of what it could be, given the history of what it had been built around. But it was a real relationship, not a performed one, and Caroline had discovered, somewhat to her own surprise, that she valued it. Vivian was trying, in the specific effortful way of someone who has acknowledged a failure and has chosen not to repeat it. Caroline respected effort. Dominic came for his first visitation weekend in mid-January. He was attentive in Eliza's presence, in the way Caroline had anticipated, better at the performance of fatherhood than its sustained practice. But the performance was not nothing. Eliza would have access to the performance. She would make her own assessments in time. This was, Caroline had come to understand, the specific mercy of raising a daughter. You cannot protect her from reality. You can only ensure she has the tools to read it clearly. The bulbs came up in April. Caroline was at the kitchen window on a Tuesday morning in the 4th month of her daughter's life, holding a coffee that was, for the first time in weeks, actually warm. Eliza was asleep in the bassinet in the living room, the deep, boneless sleep of the safely fed and the fully loved. The morning was early and quiet, and the light was doing something extraordinary to the backyard. And there they were, the tulips she had planted in September, in the last weeks of her marriage, before she knew it was ending, in the blind optimism of a woman who was still, at that moment, making plans with someone who had already stopped making plans with her. Small green shoots pushing up through the cold earth, red and yellow, beginning to open in the April light. She had forgotten about them entirely. She had planted them, and then everything changed, and the garden was the furthest thing from her mind through all of it. Through the restaurant, and the slap, and the 14 months, and the apartment lease, and the nursery at 2 in the morning, and the coffee with Serena, and the advisory board, and the notarized document, and the arrival of Eliza at 6:22 on a December morning. And here they were, growing anyway, growing without her attention, growing without her managing them, growing because she had put them in the ground and given them the conditions they needed, and then stepped back, and they had done the rest entirely on their own. Things grow on their own, she thought. That is the thing I keep forgetting and keep relearning. She drank her coffee. She had a video call at 9 with the team at the consultancy she had been rebuilding, the practice she had paused 4 years ago, which she had been quietly reassembling since November, which had already gained 3 new clients on the strength of her reputation alone. Elaine Cross, who had left Whitfield Industries with impeccable timing and considerable severance, was joining the consultancy in May. She had a lunch meeting at 11:30 with a potential 4th client, a company that had reached out specifically because of what they described as her clear-eyed approach to complex situations. She had laughed when she read that email. Nora, beside her on the couch, had said, "They have absolutely no idea what they're getting." At 3, she was meeting her father at the park 2 blocks away. He had retired finally, after years of her mother's gentle campaigning, and they had developed the habit of Tuesday walks with Eliza in the stroller, a habit she suspected would continue long after it stopped being necessary for her mental health and became simply something they did, something she looked forward to, something that belonged to the structure of her weeks. Tomorrow, Vivian Caldwell was coming to see her granddaughter for the 3rd time. Saturday, Nora was arriving with her new girlfriend, someone who had strong opinions about French cinema and made very good focaccia, according to Nora. Caroline had decided in advance that she liked her. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and the early warmth coming through the window. The tulips in the garden were opening in the April light. Eliza was breathing in the slow, deliberate rhythm of the completely unbothered. Caroline set down her cup. She thought about the woman she had been in the restaurant on that November evening, sitting alone at a corner table, checking her phone 3 times in 4 minutes, filling her husband's absence with small, repetitive rituals that prevented her from thinking too hard. She had held so much, so quietly, for so long. She had organized her entire life around the edges of someone else's, convinced that this was what love required. She thought about the woman who walked out of that restaurant, "Enjoy your dinner," she had said. She had not known, in that moment, what she was walking toward. She had only known what she was walking away from. And sometimes, she had learned this in the months since, in the long and complicated process of becoming someone she recognized. Sometimes that is the only information you need. The direction, not the destination. The direction is enough. She had not understood, standing on that sidewalk, in the November cold, with ice from a tipped water glass still damp on her dress, that she was not ending something. She was beginning something. She was beginning the right story. She understood this now, watching the tulips open in her garden on a Tuesday morning in April, with her daughter breathing in the next room and her work waiting and her father coming at 3 and her mother's voice still warm in the memory of "I'm already packing." She finally understood that the door had been unlocked all along. She had simply needed the right moment to walk through it. The morning was waiting. She picked up Eliza, carefully, the way she always picked her up, with both hands and full attention, and she held her daughter against her shoulder, and she stood at the kitchen window, and she showed her the garden. "Tulips," she said. "I planted those in September, before you were here. I forgot about them, and they grew anyway." Eliza looked at the window with the wide, dark, entirely focused gaze of someone who is new to the world and finds it comprehensively interesting. "That's a lesson," Caroline said. "I'll remind you of it when you need it." She held her daughter and watched the tulips open, and the morning was good. Closing disclaimer: this story was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team. All characters, names, and events are entirely fictional and are created for narrative and emotional resonance. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is coincidental. Thank you for spending this time with us. We'll see you in the next story.